Greetings, fellow modelers. Phil Lister here of Lister Model Works with yet another exciting video. Yes, I know it's been a while since the last video, but hey, life happens, right? We've all been there before. Well, in this video, we're collaborating yet again with Resin Realities. You may recall the last collaboration was with their Sasquatch kit based on that painting by Ken Kelly. It was a really great kit. Well, this time around, we've got another great kit for you, sculpted by none other than Wayne Hansen. It's a Bernie Wrightson Frankenstein kit. This is a great kit. Lots of detail, a terrific sculpt, and a really fun paint. So, without further ado, let's get started on the Bernie Wrightson Frankenstein.
Okay, so the first order of business was to examine the kit. This was a very clean, nice casting, very few problems at all, virtually no seam lines to even think about. There was a minor seam line, but it was nothing difficult at all to take care of. Very nice sculpt, very clean castings. And the base again was done very nicely. A lot of really good detail. Nice emblem. Of course, the book was sculpted as part of the base. Very nicely done. I did put some felt pads on the bottom to prevent marring any of the surfaces. Here are the arms. Again, very clean castings, very nicely done. A lot of good detail. Pins which are designed to fit into the sockets of the body or the upper arms. Here are the hands. Again, very nicely done. Very clean castings. Here are the holes where the arms would go into. And I'm going to use pins that I made from coat hanger wire. So I'm going to use those to fit right into the sockets of both arms. When it came to the feet, I decided I was going to use screws, so I used a larger bit and I drilled holes into the bottoms of the feet and then corresponding holes into the base. I used a Dremel and a smaller bit to drill the holes into the arm sockets so that I could put the pins in and then do the other arm sections. Here's the figure attached to the base using the screws. I used Krylon primer, a gray primer, excellent paint, and dries very flat. I just applied a nice even coat. When it comes to the paints, I like to use craft paints, and Apple Barrel colors are high on the list. These paints come in 2-ounce bottles. They're fairly cheap. They're available at most art and craft stores as well as Walmart. They come in a wide range of colors. When it comes to testers, I do use their dull coat, their gloss coat, and their metallics. Their metallics just can't be beat. Acrylic metallics just aren't all that great. When it comes to airbrushing, I use Folk Art Extender, which helps keep the paint from drying too fast in the nozzle of the airbrush when you're spraying. Now I started with the base, and I'm using a dark burnt umber that I'm going to use to base coat the base. I have other colors here on the palette that I'm going to use for dry brushing later on, and we'll get into that in a few minutes. And I just started base coating using the burnt umber, getting some nice even coverage all over this base. You just want to make sure you get that coated in there and get all into all the nooks and crannies. I tried to keep the areas where the feet will go open, because I ended up having to glue them to the base anyway. And I came back with a hairdryer and just wanted to speed dry the paint. That's really the nice thing about acrylics. You can use a hairdryer to speed up the drying time. Now I'm going to use a very soft powder puff-like brush for the actual dry brushing. And basically you're just going to take some of your lighter colors using the dark umber and the other colors on the palette. I mixed a much lighter brown color, and I wiped off the excess onto a paper towel, because you really just want the paint on the ends of the bristles. You don't want a lot of paint on the brush, and you just start with a very light scrubbing motion, and you want to go against the texture, and you'll notice how all the detail begins to really pop out. As you scrub against the surface, you can see how the paint hits the uppermost surfaces and doesn't go into all the little cracks and all the little nooks and crannies. And you just want to proceed to, dry brush that to bring out all that texture. I did come back with a few other shades. I did use a kind of a light reddish clay color, and I just wanted to vary the tones on the different stones on the base. So I used a gray, I used a kind of a reddish brown. Now I'm coming back with some thinned down straight black, and what I'm doing here after I painted the mortar lines a pale gray color is I'm using the black in the airbrush to just sort of feather the edges along the stones, and I'm darkening the areas along the edges of the stones. This just adds a little bit more dimension to the whole thing. I did come back with the black and I painted the edges of the base, and if you look closely you'll see the black areas along the feathering along the outer perimeters of the stones. Now Resin Realities did supply these paper printouts that are supposed to represent pages from the book, but the only thing was the color was a little off, and they were elongated. They were stretched vertically, so they didn't quite fit properly, and even the book cover itself was stretched vertically, so it didn't really quite fit the book cover. So what I ended up doing was using Photoshop. I found some pages online, right-clicked and saved, and I printed them out, created the book cover in Photoshop, and everything was created proportionally. I even did some blood splatter on 2 of the pages, and I simply cut the pages out as well as the book cover and then glued everything down to the base in a kind of a random order. I just simply used some white glue brushed onto the back of the pages. Now the next thing was the figure. The primer's dry, and I took some Magic Sculpt and I went over the joints of the model to just sort of smooth everything out a little bit to get rid of the joint seams. And then once the putty was dry, I was ready to proceed with painting it. And here are the colors that I ended up mixing. Now these were all custom mixes, except of course for the Tester's silver and the black and the Tamiya clear red. The other colors were all custom mixed using craft paints. And since everyone has a different way of painting, or everyone has different color choices, you may decide to use other shades or other paints, but these are the ones that I decided to use. I'm starting with actually the base flesh tone color. So I begin with some white, and after I add the white, I came back with some burnt umber, and I mixed that in with the white, a little tiny bit of red, and a little bit of orange. Then I thinned it all down with some folk art extender. You only have to add a few drops of this to the mix. And I'm adding this to the airbrush bottle. I use a Badger Anthem. Then I simply base coat the figure using the base flesh tone, making sure to get plenty of even coverage. And once that's dry, I'm now ready to proceed with the next phase. And that was to mix up a lighter shade of the base color, because now I'm going to dry brush a lighter shade over all the texture, all the details of the figure. The face contains quite a bit of detail, quite a bit of texture, And the only real way to bring that out is to either do a wash inside of all the recessed areas, or to simply come back with a thicker version of the base color, a lighter version of the base color, and then to dry brush over the base color. And that's what I'm doing here. The paint is quite thick. It's a lot thicker than it would be for airbrushing. And again, you want to use a powder puff-like brush. You want something very, very soft. And all you really want to do is just dip the ends of the bristles into the paint. You don't want to get a lot of paint all over the whole brush. Just want to make sure that the ends of the bristles have the paint. And you're still probably going to have to clean it off a little bit. And you'll notice here, again, as I'm scrubbing against the paper towel, you'll see how I'm only hitting the uppermost surfaces of the texture. And here we go, applying that paint directly to the model. And you'll notice how it's only hitting the uppermost surfaces. It really makes all those details pop out. And you want to continue doing this along the entire surface of the model, all over the face, the neck, the chest, the arms, because there's still a lot of texture there. There's a lot of skin texture that was sculpted into the model. This just makes all those little details just pop right out. Okay, now I'm coming back with a little bit of a darker version. This is the shadow color, and this has been thinned down for airbrushing using some folk art extender. This is really some great stuff. It really does do the job. Now I'm coming back, I've lowered the air pressure, and I'm hitting strategic areas, all the recessed areas of the model. We're getting all the musculature. You'll notice how there's the areas that are recessed have much darker tone. Now we're starting to really define all the texture and all the musculature areas of the model. Now I'm going to come back with a thinned down purple. And this is to really kind of add some of the bruising effect. So I'm going to concentrate this in areas where there are the stitchings and where the staples are, things like that, because there's going to be a lot of bruising there. We're also going to add it in other areas which will lend itself well to the lividity of the body. So you'll notice here I'm spraying into the recessed areas. Now I did mix up some red, and again I thinned it down, and again I came back and added it to some of the recessed areas as well as the other areas of the body. I also came back and created some under the skin veining. Now I'm blocking in the black for the hair. You just want to work very carefully, use a fine tipped brush for all the little fine strands of hair. You could use a wider brush for the larger areas. Now I'm using some Tamiya clear red, thinned down and applied to the stitching. Here I am painting the mouth, the gums, and the lips. I started off with a red. I did use a pinkish flesh tone for the lips. Now the eyes. So here I've mixed up a kind of a warm oyster gray, and I've painted the white areas of the eyes. The teeth are next. They're blocked in using a kind of an ivory color. Once the teeth were finished, I then came back to paint the pupils of the eyes. I didn't give the eyes a whole lot of detail because I was purposely going for a very lifeless sort of look. The bandages were painted a very pale gray, and then I mixed up a lighter shade of that pale gray, an almost white color, and then I dry brushed on the surfaces of the bandages to really heighten the the effect, to really bring out the texture, and to really make all those details pop. I wanted a wet look on the creature, as though he had just come out of a vat. So here I am applying a coat of clear, using future floor wax and water, actually, to give him a really wet, slick look. I didn't do the bandaged areas because even if they were wet, they would not appear glossy. And here he is, all finished up. Here you can really see the veining under the skin much better. Bernie Wrightson's Frankenstein by Resin Realities, sculpted by Wayne Hansen. This kit was a lot of fun to paint. I highly recommend it. This is Phil Lister of Lister Model Works. So long for now.